Every serial killer in history follows the same hunting sequence, not a similar sequence, not a loosely comparable sequence, the same one. Richard Chase in Sacramento, 1978. Dennis Rader in Wichita, across 3 decades. Israel Keyes, crisscrossing the continental United States with pre-buried murder kits in the 2000s. Different people, different motives, different levels of intelligence, impulse control, and planning capacity. Identical behavioral algorithm. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit has a term for it. They call it the predatory cycle, and it has not changed in the entire recorded history of serial homicide. The people who investigate these cases for a living, the profilers, the forensic psychologists, the detectives who spend years inside a single case file, will tell you the same thing. The pattern is not a theory. It is an observation confirmed across hundreds of cases, decades of data, and every cultural context where serial predation has been documented. 5 phases, always 5, always in the same order. And the reason it never changes has less to do with psychology and more to do with neurology. Someone spent decades hunting people from a position of total civic normalcy: church president, Cub Scout leader, municipal compliance officer. And the mechanism that drove each kill was structurally identical to the one used by a man who selected victims based on whether their front door was locked. Phase 1 is selection. Every predator selects. The selection criteria vary: vulnerability, proximity, symbolic value, opportunity, but the act of selection is universal. The predator does not attack at random. The predator evaluates, sorts, and chooses. Richard Chase walked through a residential neighborhood in Sacramento in January 1978 and tried door handles. Locked doors meant the person inside did not want him there. An unlocked door was an invitation. That was his selection criterion. Not appearance, not age, not behavior. Whether the door was locked. He killed 6 people in the span of 6 weeks. When police arrested him, he explained the logic without hesitation. If your door is locked, you are safe. If it is not, you have given permission. In his framework, this was coherent. BTK, Dennis Rader, selected differently. He called it trolling. He would drive through neighborhoods at specific times, watching routines. Who left for work at 7:15? Who lived alone? Whose blinds were open at night? He tracked patterns over weeks, sometimes months, before making a decision. His selection was not impulsive, it was logistical. He mapped his targets the way a delivery driver maps a route. Rader held a job in municipal compliance. He inspected properties for code violations. He had a legal reason to knock on doors, peer into yards, and ask questions about who lived where. His professional role was a selection tool, a locked door and a municipal work schedule, 2 entirely different methods. Same phase. Phase 2 is the stalk. After selection, the predator gathers information: movement patterns, entry points, social connections. The stalk can last minutes or months. Chase barely stalked. His cycle compressed everything into hours. Keyes stalked for months. He cached supplies, weapons, cash, disposal materials in buckets buried in remote locations across multiple states, years before he intended to use them. When the FBI eventually recovered these kits, they found zip ties, chemical drain cleaner, and garbage bags. Keyes called them kill kits. He buried them near lakes, hiking trails, and rural roads, locations he had scouted on solo driving trips that his family believed were fishing vacations. The stalk was the longest phase of his cycle. The kill itself was almost administrative. Phase 3 is the approach. The predator closes distance. This is where the cycle branches into 2 subtypes that behavioral scientists have categorized since the 1980s: the blitz approach and the con approach. Blitz is sudden physical overwhelm. No conversation, no ruse, no warning. Chase used blitz. Con is social engineering. The predator creates a pretext for proximity. Ted Bundy used a fake arm cast and asked women for help carrying books. Rader sometimes knocked on doors with a cover story. Keyes preferred blitz at night. The approach type correlates loosely with planning capacity and impulse control, but the phase itself is invariant. Every predator closes distance. The method differs. The function does not. Mr. Grimm checked the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit case archive. The 5-phase model has no documented exceptions across 4 decades of profiling data. 0. Phase 4 is the capture itself, the act. This is the phase that true crime content fixates on, the details, the method, the weapon. But from a behavioral analysis perspective, it is the least informative phase of the cycle. What the predator does during capture tells you about their pathology. How they selected, stalked, and approached tells you how to find them. Profilers spend 80% of their analytical time on phases 1 through 3, and 20% on phase 4. The public spends 95% of its attention on phase 4. Phase 5 is the post-offense behavior, disposal, concealment, and what forensic psychology calls cooling off. Some predators dispose methodically. Keys dismembered victims and distributed remains across multiple locations. Some predators display. BTK position victims in deliberate poses and photograph them. Some predators do nothing. Chase left victims where they fell and went home. The post-offense phase reveals the predator's relationship to the act. Disposal indicates shame, fear of detection, or pragmatism. Display indicates ownership, fantasy fulfillment, or communication. Absence of post-offense behavior indicates disorganization or indifference. 5 phases: selection, stalk, approach, capture, post-offense. Every documented serial predator in every FBI database, every Interpol file, every academic case study cycles through these 5 phases in this order. The compression varies. Chase completed the cycle in hours, Keys in months, BTK in years. The phases do not. The question is why? Not why people kill. That has dozens of answers, most of them partial. Why the pattern is always the same. Why it does not mutate, adapt, or innovate across individuals, decades, and cultures. A serial predator in 1950s Kansas follows the same behavioral architecture as one in 2012 Alaska. The answer is neurological. When the human brain enters a predatory state, not reactive aggression, which is impulsive and emotional, but predatory aggression, which is planned and goal-directed, a specific neural circuit activates. The prefrontal cortex handles planning and target evaluation. The amygdala modulates arousal and threat assessment. The hypothalamus coordinates the autonomic response, heart rate, adrenaline, sensory sharpening. This circuit is not unique to serial killers. It is the same circuit that activates when a hunter tracks an animal, when a chess player calculates a sequence, when a military sniper selects a firing position. Predatory cognition is a mode, not a pathology. What differs in serial predation is not the circuit, it is what the circuit is pointed at. Neuroscientist Kent Keel spent years conducting brain scans on incarcerated psychopaths in New Mexico. His imaging data showed reduced gray matter in the paralimbic system, the region associated with empathy, guilt, and emotional processing. The predatory circuit functions normally. The circuit that would normally inhibit it, that would generate the emotional signal saying, "This is a person, stop," is structurally diminished. The accelerator works, the brake does not. The pattern never changes because the hardware never changes. Different software, different motives, fantasies, justifications, runs on the same neural architecture. Selection, stalk, approach, capture, post-offense. The sequence is dictated by how the predatory brain processes a goal-directed hunt. Change the target, the timeline, the geography, the era, the cycle holds. Profilers exploit this. If they know a predator is in phase 2, stalking, they can predict the approach window. If they identify the selection criteria, they can narrow the victim pool. If they study the post-offense behavior, they can determine whether the cycle is accelerating or decelerating. And the cycle almost always accelerates. The cooling off period between kills shortens. The selection becomes less careful. The stalk compresses. This is why serial predators are most often caught late in their sequence. The pattern degrades as the cycle speeds up, and the mistakes accumulate. Keys was caught because he used a victim's debit card at an ATM. Raider was caught because he sent a floppy disk to a television station and the metadata contained his church's name. Chase was caught because he left fingerprints, shoe prints, and a direct trail from the crime scene to his apartment. 3 different predators, 3 different eras, 3 identical failure modes. The degradation of caution as the cycle accelerated past their capacity to manage it. The pattern does not break. It compresses until the predator breaks it himself. Every serial killer in history hunted the same way because every human brain hunts the same way. The difference between a predator and everyone else is not the circuit, it is the target. And the only thing separating a functioning brake system from a broken one is a few cubic centimeters of gray matter in a region most people will never hear named. The predators in this video followed a pattern built into the brain, but there was a government program that tried to go further. Not just understand the brain, but rewrite it, erase memories, implant new ones, break a human mind down to components, and rebuild it from scratch. The subjects were American citizens, the program was funded by the CIA, and the people who survived it were never the same.